Week 13 of the NFL season is officially here, so in this video, let's go ahead and try and predict every single game of week number 13. But if you guys enjoyed the video, make sure you guys hit the like and subscribe button. Let's hop into it. Now, this is going to be a potentially very long video. We have every single team playing this week, included 3 Thanksgiving games. Happy Thanksgiving, by the way. And 1 Black Friday game. Happy Black Friday, I guess. It's going to be a crazy video. I won't be able to go into extensive detail into every game, but I'll give you guys a general analysis for each game. We are going to begin with our Thursday Night Football 11:30 game between the Chicago Bears and the Detroit Lions. The Chicago Bears are on a 5-game losing streak, whereas the Detroit Lions are just simply put one of the best teams in the NFL. I do expect this game to be somewhat close. I don't think it's going to be necessarily a gigantic blowout like what we've seen the Lions do basically every single week this season. Chicago's defense is good enough to keep the offense in the game, and I do think the offense is getting better, but ultimately speaking, that is a Bears team that's trying to figure things out, whereas the Lions have already figured things out. They understand it now. So because of that, I don't think the final score is going to be extremely close, but I do think the game itself will be close. At some point, I think the Lions will be able to establish the run and just put together a long, methodical drive that gives them like an 8 to 10 point lead. So ultimately, I have the Lions winning 27-17. Then we have our 3 o'clock Thanksgiving game between the Dallas Cowboys and the New York Giants. The Dallas Cowboys, for whatever reason, feel like they all of a sudden have a bunch of confidence and a little bit of a boost of energy from last week's victory over the Commanders. Whereas the Giants feels like it's the exact opposite. It feels like the entire energy and motivation and confidence has been sucked out of the building ever since Danny Dimes left the team. I feel like this is kind of a self-explanatory one. The Dallas Cowboys have been really good against the Giants, regardless of who's at quarterback, especially when Dak is playing. They're super dominant, but I think Cooper Rush is a good enough backup to get the job done here. We have a weird matchup between Cooper Rush and Tommy DeVito on Thanksgiving. Cinema. Ultimately, I have the Dallas Cowboys winning 21-13. I think they're just a better team with more talent. CeeDee Lamb should feast in this one, so it should be a good game. And then to end off Thanksgiving, we have an awesome matchup between the Miami Dolphins and the Green Bay Packers. Do not listen to what that record says for that Dolphins team. They are a really tough team to go up against. They are currently on a bit of a win streak, granted against some not so good teams, but hey, wins are wins. And I just have a gut feeling about this one. This Packers team hasn't played extremely well as of late. Now, granted, last week versus the Niners might have been their most well put together game, but outside of that Niners game, they had an ugly victory versus the Bears, an ugly victory versus the Jaguars. They lost to the Detroit Lions. They haven't necessarily been playing their best football. Again, I do want to throw the caveat, they just had their best game of the season last week, so maybe that energy could push into this Thursday game, but I have a gut feeling that Tyreek Hill is going to get going in this one. Jalen Waddle is going to be there. The offense is going to be so good that I have a feeling we might be in for a bit of a shootout, with Miami maybe being the better and more equipped team to win a shootout type of game. I do think Green Bay is a better team than Miami, but I just feel like because Miami's going to play with a lot more desperation, and maybe Green Bay is coming into this one a tad bit overconfident, maybe they could win it. The one thing I will say is I believe this game is being played in Green Bay, and Miami does not play well in cold games, so maybe that sways my opinion, but I'm going to go with the Miami Dolphins to win a much-needed game against the Green Bay Packers 31-28. And then we have our Black Friday game between the Las Vegas Raiders and the Kansas City Chiefs. And I think this is a game that you probably should not be tuning in. Go on to Amazon, go get your Black Friday deals. Do not watch this game because it is not going to be a competitive matchup. The Kansas City Chiefs are going to put belt to ass against the Las Vegas Raiders. This Raiders team sucks, and they're on their 3rd string quarterback, and yeah, they don't have Devontae Adams, they don't have a competent coaching staff. This game, in my opinion, will be a blowout, and I don't think it's going to be watchable by the 4th quarter. I think Mahomes is going to put it on the Las Vegas Raiders. They're going to find a way to win this one. I don't have much to talk about. The Raiders suck, the Chiefs are good. 28-10, Kansas City. Then we have the Houston Texans versus the Jacksonville Jaguars. The Texans are not playing good football right now, and they need a bit of a rebound type of performance against a bad Jaguars team. Unfortunately for this game, we're not 100% sure as of at least when I'm making this video, which is on Tuesday, so maybe some things have changed, but as of when I'm making the video, it is unclear whether or not Trevor Lawrence will be available in this game. I do think that does fundamentally change this game, whether or not he does play. I still think the outcome is already decided, but if Trevor does play, it could be a bit more of a competitive matchup. Because let's be real, Mac Jones sucks. Trevor Lawrence is at least somewhat good. Again, as I mentioned earlier, though, I don't think it's going to necessarily change the outcome of this game. I do think Houston will be able to win. I think Houston is just a better, talented, more coached team that's playing at a higher level right now. Even though Houston isn't playing good football and they just had a bad loss versus Tennessee, I do think they are still clearly the better team with the better quarterback, with the better coach, with the better roster. So if everything does add up, I think the Houston Texans will find a way to win this one. I'll give you guys two predictions for if Trevor plays or if Trevor doesn't play. If Trevor does play, I think the final score is 35-21. If Trevor does not play, I think it's 35 to like 14. Hey y'all, real quick, I just want to interrupt this video to let you guys know that I have a brand new YouTube channel called Metro Stories. It is simply going to be focused on NFL stories, whether it's on players and teams. I think you guys might like it, so go ahead and check it out. The link will be in the description below as well as in the pinned comment. I think you guys might like it. Let's get back to the video though. Moving on to the New England Patriots versus the Indianapolis Colts. The Colts are coming off a pretty ugly loss to the Detroit Lions. I will give them their flowers. That was a close game for like maybe a quarter and a half, which is better than what a lot of teams have done against the Lions this year. Whereas for the Patriots, they're coming off a really bad loss, maybe their worst loss of the season. Patriots, you know, they're a rebuilding team. They're trying to figure things out. The coaching staff is still very new. They're still figuring things out on their end. Drake May's making mistakes, but also playing well enough. This Colts team, though, has a huge advantage in terms of talent, in terms of experience, and just in terms of better talent players. I think I said that already, but you get my point. Jonathan Taylor had a bad week last week. I expect a big bounce back performance. I expect Anthony Richardson to play a more clean, efficient brand of football, and this Colts defense to ultimately shut down Drake May and the offense enough to find ways to win this one. I think a big key for both teams is getting the ball into the end zone. I feel like both teams will be able to move the ball, but which team is going to be able to not kick field goals and score more touchdowns? And I think Indianapolis might be a bit more equipped for that, so I am going to pick the Colts to win a game 26-18. Moving on to what is another really fun game, the LA Chargers versus the Atlanta Falcons. The LA Chargers are coming off a bit of a stinker versus the Baltimore Ravens. They played well in the first half. Second half, things kind of fell apart. Atlanta, they're coming off a stinker against the Denver Broncos where they got smoked, and I believe they're coming off a bye week this week, so they should be a bit more rested and a bit more equipped to have a more competitive matchup. My issue with this Falcons team is I don't see a world where they even lay a finger on Justin Herbert. Chargers have a good offensive line. They have some, good coaches, and the Falcons just don't have a pass rush right now. I think for the Atlanta Falcons, if they're going to get any sort of pressure and really put anything on Justin Herbert, they're going to have to blitz. And because this team isn't necessarily a blitzing team, I feel like Justin Herbert's going to be playing 7-on-7 like Bo Nix was. Now the question becomes, can this Falcons secondary match up against what is a not so great group of wide receivers? I think they can, but Ladd McConkey's really starting to put things together, and as long as Quentin Johnston doesn't have 3 drops like he did last week, I think that Justin Herbert should find a lot of success. This Chargers defense is really good. They didn't have a great week last week, but I expect them to have a bounce back performance against a Falcons offense that isn't operating at a very high level. So because of that, I'm definitely leaning towards the Chargers to win this game. I do think it will be a close game with both offenses having some really good moments, but ultimately speaking, I think the pass rushing differential is going to be drastic. I think the offensive line play is also one-sided, so I do have the LA Chargers winning 24-21. Moving on to the Seattle Seahawks versus the New York Jets. This is what I call a good old-fashioned trap game for the Seattle Seahawks. The Seahawks are coming off a major high over the last 2 weeks of beating the Niners and then beating the division winners in the Arizona Cardinals, and now you're going up against a Jets team that has nothing to play for but still has a bunch of talented players. The Seattle Seahawks have got to be locked into this game, because if they lose this game, it's going to be a bad loss, because this is not a good Jets team. The Jets are poorly managed, poorly coached. They don't have great quarterback play right now, and their stars aren't playing like stars. With that all said, they did just have a bye week, so they're a bit more rested, a bit more healthy, and they've probably put together a really solid game plan against the Seahawks team. So if they have done it, again, Seahawks, be careful. I'm warning you now, but I don't think it's going to happen. I do think Seattle will come into this game with a little bit more focus and attention, because they realize that they're in a good position to try and actually win the division. And if that does happen, I do think the receiving core for the Seattle Seahawks will give the Jets a bunch of issues. I think Geno Smith is still playing at a high level, even though he hasn't had the best couple weeks. I think he's had some good moments. I think Geno Smith will outplay Aaron Rodgers, so I do have the Seahawks winning 26-19. But again, I warned you, this thing is going to be close. Next up, we have the Tennessee Titans and the Washington Commanders, and again, watch out for the Tennessee Titans. They are coming off a massive win against the Houston Texans. Will Levis is playing better football, and the defense is still pretty good. Washington is coming off a pretty bad loss to the Dallas Cowboys. They're also on a 3-game losing streak, so they need to kind of fix the ship, or else the ship is going to sink, if you get my drift. And they have a not so easy matchup versus the Titans. I know the Titans' record is really bad. They're going to have a top 5 pick, and they don't have a great quarterback, but they're playing better football, and it feels like the team is starting to have a little bit more spirit, a little bit more confidence and motivation. And because of all that, I kind of feel like Tennessee can win this one. Like, Tennessee is not a good team, don't get me wrong, but their defense is pretty good. The Washington offense is really struggling. I do think Jaden Daniels can carry this offense to scoring a good amount of points, but Will Levis will make enough big plays himself against a defense that I don't think is going to be able to generate a bunch of pressure because, yes, the Titans' offensive line isn't good, but the defensive line for Washington also isn't very good, especially on the edge. I don't necessarily think it's going to be a blowout, but I just have a gut feeling, and I could be wrong, but I have a gut feeling that Tennessee might win this one. I feel like they have a lot of different advantages that they could exploit in a matchup versus Washington, especially because Washington is not playing good football, and they're coming off a loss that could potentially demoralize them because the Dallas Cowboys suck, and they wanted to win that one, and they didn't. So because of that, upset alert, I have the Tennessee Titans winning 28-24. Moving over to an AFC North matchup between the Pittsburgh Steelers and the Cincinnati Bengals. This game is going to be really interesting for honestly both teams. For Cincinnati, their season might be over with. They could put together a bit of a run, but it's extremely unlikely for them to actually make the playoffs. So they're at this point playing for money, playing for pride, all that fun stuff. Whereas for the Steelers, you're coming off a bad loss versus the Cleveland Browns. Yes, the conditions were bad, but still, it's a bad loss. And you have a lot of pressure on you because the Baltimore Ravens are staring you right behind you, trying to beat you for your first place in the AFC North. This is one of those matchups that I just have a feeling that the Cincinnati Bengals are going to get the upper hand on the Steelers. The Bengals are loose. They don't care. Nothing really they have left to play for. Steelers, they have everything to play for. They're playing like their season's dependent upon it. And that can really do one of two things. If you know that you have to win a game to keep first place in the division, you can either play tight, scared, not so good, or you could play loose. Who cares? It's first place. We're going to win this game to try to get first place and come in with a bit of extra confidence, a bit of extra motivation. So we will see what the Steelers team is feeling like this week. Ultimately, though, I do think the Bengals have a good amount of talent to match up with the Steelers team. The Steelers offense isn't playing particularly great. I do think the Bengals defense isn't playing good either, but they're playing better football. So because of that, I think the Bengals offense will be able to get going, especially if TJ Watt isn't generating a bunch of pressure, which by the way, he did not do very well against the Browns last week. So because of that, I'm going to pick the Bengals, another upset, to win 30-20. And then moving on, we have the Arizona Cardinals versus the Minnesota Vikings, an awesome game between two pretty good teams. For Minnesota, you're trying to continue to push for the NFC North lead. You're probably hoping for Chicago to beat the Detroit Lions. The Vikings are a good team. They haven't played amazing football the past couple weeks. I thought they played well this most recent week, but they've just done what has been necessary to win games, which is all that really matters. Whereas for Arizona, you're coming off a really disappointing loss to the Seattle Seahawks. You had a great week against the New York Jets. You were feeling really good about yourself, and then you came out with a stinker versus the Seattle Seahawks. So now this is going to be a bit of a bounce back performance from Kyler Murray and this Cardinals offense, but unfortunately, they're going up against one of the best teams in the NFL with a defense that is very complicated, difficult to go up against, and, like I said, not really a good offense, or not really a good defense to want to go to in a bounce back week. Typically, when you're coming off a bad loss, you want to go up against a bad team like, I don't know, the New York Giants to get back your confidence, but now you're going up against the Minnesota Vikings, which is the opposite of the New York Giants. Sam Darnold is playing clean and better football. This Cardinals team just doesn't have the talent to match up. I do think it will be a close one because basically every single Minnesota game has been fairly close, at least as of lately. So I am going to pick the Vikings to win, but I think it will be close. I think Kyler will have a big bounce back performance, but it won't be enough to ultimately win. I do have the Vikings winning 32-27. And then we begin our 3 o'clock window between the LA Rams and the New Orleans Saints. This game should be pretty interesting between two teams that I don't really know how to feel about right now. Both these teams have a lot of talent, have good quarterbacks, but aren't playing great football. The Rams are finally healthy for once. The Rams are finally healthy and they're playing better football than what we saw earlier in the season, but they're also coming off a pretty bad loss to the Philadelphia Eagles. Granted, the Eagles are an awesome team, but still it was a bit of a disappointing performance. Whereas the Saints team, they've played better the past couple weeks. They have a lot of talented players. Alvin Kamara, Derek Carr, you name it, they got it. And I don't think this will be an easy matchup for the LA Rams. I think the Rams will be the favorites to win this one because they have better coaching and, in my opinion, a better, more healthy roster. But at the same time, something about this Saints team makes me a little bit pessimistic about whether the Rams could really blow them out. I think the Rams will win this one because I think Stafford, the guys, they kind of need to win this one if they realistically want to make the playoffs. So I think they'll come into this one with a lot of confidence, a bit of motivation. Whereas for the Saints, the season's already kind of over with. You're just really fighting for pride at this point. So I am going to pick the LA Rams to win 22-17. Then we move on to the Buccaneers versus the Panthers. Again, a 3 o'clock game. This one, all of a sudden, has gotten a little bit more interesting because the Panthers are playing good football right now. I mean, they just took the Chiefs to a fourth quarter, comeback victory for the Kansas City Chiefs, which is very impressive. Shout out to Bryce Young. That boy is playing right now. And the Buccaneers have, quietly been below average lately, but are in a position now where they could contend for the first place in their division. Unfortunately for the Panthers, I just don't know if they're going to have the talent to ultimately win these type of games against competent, well-coached teams. With Bryce Young playing better, they can make the games competitive and make these games fun and a bit more interesting. But when it comes down to it, if I'm going to take a more talented offense versus a less talented defense, I'm always going to pick the talented offense. And that's kind of the case of this game here. I do think the offense for Carolina will be able to contend in this game because the Buccaneers defense isn't necessarily that good. So I do think Bryce Young will continue this sort of trend of playing good football, which, by the way, I hope he does. Ultimately, though, I think Baker Mayfield's playing at a very high level, and this Panthers defense isn't that good. So I do think Tampa Bay will win this one, but I think it will be close. I have the final score 21 Tampa Bay, 19 Carolina. And then we have what should be arguably the game of the week. We will see if that ends up coming to fruition, but matchup-wise, on paper-wise, Philadelphia versus Baltimore, this game is interesting. Let me get this out of the way. I expect 300, 400 plus rushing yards combined. You have Saquon Barkley, Jalen Hurts, Derrick Henry, and Lamar Jackson on the football field. This game is going to be awesome. Now, this one's a tough one to predict. I legitimately think that this is a 50-50 split here. I do think both offenses are great. Both rushing offenses are good. Both offensive lines are playing well. Both have good weapons on the outside, say Flowers, A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith, etc. Both defenses, though, aren't great. I will say I do think Philadelphia's defense is good, whereas the Ravens aren't as good. They're both very talented with great players on both sides, but Philadelphia's a better defense. I would say Baltimore might be a slightly better offense because of how good Lamar's playing. Again, this is a total 50-50 split. This is the hardest game of the week to predict. I don't really have a necessarily confident pick in this one, but I think Jalen Hurts and A.J. Brown are going to get one big play that's really going to open this game up. And I got Philadelphia winning. I wish I had more of an analysis to pick why I think they're going to win. I just think Saquon's going to cook. I think A.J. Brown's going to cook. And as long as Jalen Hurts doesn't turn the ball over, I think they're going to have a bit of an edge here. Lamar's going to play great. Henry's going to play great. This game should be cinema, but I am going to pick the Philadelphia Eagles to win 31-30. Next up, we have the Buffalo Bills versus the San Francisco 49ers. Now, unfortunately, again, I am recording this on Tuesday at 8 o'clock, so I'm not 100% sure if Brock Purdy's going to play. So similar to the Jaguars game that I talked about earlier, I'm going to give you guys two predictions with two different scores, depending on if Brock Purdy does play. Similar to that Jaguars game, I don't necessarily think that Purdy changes the outcome of this game that much. I think it is a bit more of a competitive game, obviously, with Brock Purdy, but I do think Buffalo will be able to win either way. Buffalo is arguably the second best team, maybe the best team, maybe even the third best team in the AFC. Regardless of where you have them at, it's clear that they're one of the better teams in the NFL, whereas San Francisco, they just have not looked like the Niners that we've seen the past couple years. Bad coaching, players not playing up to expectations, injuries have also kind of deteriorated their season. It kind of all captures what is going to be a really tough week for the 49ers. This is a tough matchup. The Niners kind of have to win it if they realistically want to find a way to make the playoffs. But for Buffalo, you're just a better team. You have a better quarterback. You have better wide receivers. You have a better offensive line, a better, in my opinion, defense. Let's just be real at this point. So yeah, I just think that Bills are probably going to win this one. Again, if Brandon Allen is the starter, I don't think this game is close at all. I think the final score is like 34-3 or 34-10, somewhere along those lines. But if Brock Purdy does play, it does fundamentally change things, but it doesn't change my outcome. If Purdy does play, I have the final score 34 Buffalo to 20 for San Francisco. And then lastly, our Monday Night Football game between the Denver Broncos and the Cleveland Browns. Now, Cleveland is coming off a very impressive in the snow victory versus the Pittsburgh Steelers. A great victory, but I don't necessarily know if I am all of a sudden turning around my opinion of this Browns team. This Browns team is much better with Jameis Winston. I don't think there's anyone denying that, but it's still not a great team. The defense is playing better, which is kind of to be expected when the offense can actually move the ball down the field. But at the same time, it's Jameis Winston. Let's just be real. Whereas on the other side, the Broncos are playing maybe their best football of the season. Bo Nix is playing, I'll admit it, awesome. He's playing awesome right now. And he also is going up against a matchup against the Browns where the Browns, they're not playing so awesome. I think the Browns are really going to struggle against this Denver defense. I think Jameis Winston might have some turnovers, might have some really ugly plays. That's going to give Bo Nix, good field position and chances to put up even more points on the scoreboard. I do respect the Browns enough to think that they could keep this game competitive, but ultimately speaking, with Bo Nix playing the way he is, this being a big primetime opportunity to showcase his skills, I think he'll come through, and ultimately I have Denver winning 20-10. That is it. That is all 16 games predicted. This right here is a bit of a summary for everything we talked about in the video. As you can see, my record 117-62. Not too shabby. But if you guys did enjoy, make sure you guys hit the like and subscribe button. And again, go ahead and check out my new channel. I love you guys. Peace.